The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to Honest Money. We're talking about one of my favorite things in the world, which is cars. But the thing about cars for me is I love them. I love reading about them. I love driving them, and I really don't like spending money on them. So that means I don't buy lots of cars. And if I was tempted, I just have to have a conversation with my wife, and we'll delay our car purchase for another 5 or 10 years if it's up to her. So I thought it's important, to talk about this and to bring in somebody who has a deep understanding of actually how money and cars work. And so I'm thrilled actually to have Colin Morgan. He's head of pricing at getWorth. Colin, thanks so much for your time and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Warren. It's great to be here today.
So I know it's a podcast, but a lot of you will watch our podcast on video. So just to tell you, for those of you that don't see the video part, Colin's got the all-time greatest background I've ever seen on a call. He's got a movie scene from Pulp Fiction with a bit of a tweak where they're not holding guns, they're holding bananas, and it's I must say I think it's awesome, Colin. Well done. Before we've even started, you've hit the ball out the park.
Thanks. It's also one of my favorite, Warren.
So I think we're maybe kick off with the big topic. I think one of the all-time best marketing machines in any industry anywhere in the world would be the car industry. They know how to sell us a product and make us fall in love with something that's probably 5 times the price we need, and every 3 or 4 years they kind of create this urge in us to trade what we've got, which is probably perfectly usable for the next thing, the new thing. And even the cell phone industry is not doing as good a job as the car industry is doing in making us buy new cars all the time. So maybe just to kick off there, I mean, when we're doing the numbers, this is honest money, so we need to focus on that. Is there any merit to me buying a new car?
I'm a serial kind of used car fan, Warren, so I might be the wrong person to ask this question, but in my view, there are very rare circumstances where a new car might make sense. And this is coming at it from a financial perspective. And there's a hell of a lot of reasons not to buy a new car. So I'm from a financial perspective and a lifetime wealth perspective, I'm a huge fan of sticking with used cars. That said, someone has to buy the new cars, else there will be no used cars in the market. So there's a lot of different perspectives on this, but I'm a used car guy.
So, and I think it's it's a powerful point. I know I don't have the data, and that's why I'm so glad we've got you on the show. But to me, just sort of intuitively, it feels like, when you buy a new car, you get that new car smell. No one else has driven it, and it's really lovely. And then the moment you drive it off the showroom floor and you've driven your first kilometer, it's probably the most expensive kilometer of driving you will ever do, because the car is, if you have to drive it back and put it back in the showroom and say, I'd like to sell it back to you, you're not going to get close to what you paid for that car driving it off the floor.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the main reasons that used cars make more sense than new. And it's that sort of depreciation curve. So if I had to talk you through how that depreciation works, and bear in mind here, there's a huge amount of variation across different vehicles. Some depreciate really fast, some quite slowly, but we've crunched the numbers across millions of different records, market records over about 7 years. And looking at the depreciation curves that come out of that, it's quite illuminating. So if you buy a new car and you buy it and you drive it off the dealership floor, in that first minute or the first kilometer, as you say, it's the most expensive first kilometer you've ever driven. On average, cars will lose around 10% of their value. So if you've just spent 400,000 Rand, that was a 40,000 Rand kilometer you just drove.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, unbelievable. So it's a huge amount. And then what happens with that same car is after 1 year, it's now lost 15 to 20% of its value. So a lot of it is driving straight off the lot, and then it's still got quite a lot of depreciation to happen in its first year. If you take the same car, after 5 years, it's now only down in the 30 to 40% of value loss sort of range. So if it was let me use a 500,000 Rand car, it's now at 300,000 Rand, let's say, as opposed to kind of losing that 100,000 Rand in the first year. So I think what's important here is that cars are not an asset as we think of assets. Your house appreciates in value, you hope that your shares appreciate in value, that your retirement fund appreciates in value. Cars depreciate. And they depreciate according to age, and they depreciate according to how many kilometers you put on them and their condition. But except for rare exceptions, they go down in value, and a new car goes down the fastest. So once a vehicle hits a certain age range and a certain sort of mileage range, so long as it's not adding, above average mileage, it tends to flatten off a lot. You still get depreciation, but at a much lower rate. So the amount of rands that you lose in that transaction drops off a lot. And a new car traditionally is the worst. You get the heaviest depreciation in your first couple of years, and then after that, things start becoming a lot more muted.
So just to, I'm still stuck on the first kilometer. So your first kilometer, you're losing 10%. Then at the end of the year, you've driven the car for a year, and even if you haven't done a massive amount of mileage, you're losing an additional 15 to 20.
No, additional, sort of, call it an additional 10 or so.
Okay.
So
got
mostly,
it. Sorry.
You drive off a lot. And I mean, the reason for that is that used cars are simply cheaper than new. If a dealer has got a new vehicle on his floor and he moves it across into his demo stock, and he adds, they drive it a little bit, the salespeople drive it, it goes on test drives, etc. It adds 5,000 kilometers. Immediately that vehicle's pitched at a different price point. So the used market is not pitched at the same sort of ticket price as the new market. And that's why you lose that money when you sort of drive it straight off the floor. I think new cars, because of that new car smell, carry a premium. And if you're the guy who's buying the new car, you pay that premium.
So just for context, I mean, modern cars, it's not crazy nowadays to find cars that are still safe and reliable, driving 150 or 200,000 kilometers, of life. And so in the context of 5,000 Ks, I mean, 5,000 Ks is brand new. And so to try and say to someone, buy a brand new car with zero on the clock, or at least let the car do the 5,000 Ks and then buy it, you're saving yourself, I mean, if it's hundreds of thousands of rands for something which arguably to me is identical to a brand new car. I mean, a new car with 5,000 Ks on the clock. I mean, I can't imagine there's a difference unless someone dinged it. I mean, that's a new car.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. And there are exceptions to the story. Sometimes manufacturers have got too much metal that they need to move, or they're introducing a new model or something along those lines. And then you do sometimes get some heavy discounts on new cars. And sometimes extreme, up to 20-25% off the sticker price is possible to find if you shop around and you're not too sticky about what you're buying and your exact kind of color and spec combination. So there are exceptions where you can get a new car at a discounted price. But what that kind of means is that you're not taking that first 10% knock as you drive off the dealership floor. You're discounting it into the price beforehand. So I think a savvy buyer can still buy a new car without suffering the same depreciation as everyone else. But if you walk in and you're paying full manufacturer suggested retail price on that vehicle, you're most likely going to take that knock.
Oh, so let's say I've bought the argument. We're not buying a new car, and now we're looking at used. The gap between a demo car and a used car, it feels to me, I mean, listening to what you're saying, that if I wait for a car that's now 2 years old and it's got, whatever it is, 15 to 30, maybe 40,000 Ks on the clock, that's probably the peak time to buy the car. 2 years old, 30, 40,000 Ks on the clock. The bulk of the biggest part of the depreciation has now happened. I then hopefully still get Most of the new car smell, it still feels like a new car, and for all intents and purposes, I mean, you're not going to have to do anything to that car for quite some time. But if you're just looking for a method of getting from A to B as cheap as possible, and you take all the emotion, all the excitement out of it, then the idea, it sounds to me, is, and I'm putting the dates in myself, I'm not putting words in your mouth, that you actually want to buy a car that's 6 or 10 years old, because that's going to depreciate very little compared to the car that's 1 or 2 or 3 years old. And if you buy a car that's 6 years old and you drive it for 10 years, you are going to get depreciation. As you said, it's not an asset, but you're not losing the hundreds of thousands that you would have lost if you'd bought the car brand new.
Absolutely. I think the sweet spot, or in my view, the sweet spot is in that kind of 5 to 10 year range to buy it, because by that point, the early years depreciation has tailed off a lot. And then within that universe, I would then seek out the low mileage car. Worry less about age and more about mileage, in my view. So if I had to give you some ballpark numbers, cars are, or let me step back a little bit. So it's worth understanding quickly how cars migrate through the market and how the manufacturers bring out new models. So call it 8 years. I'm just using a rough number. There's a lot of variation. Every 8 years or so, a manufacturer will bring out a brand new model. Let's say the new Audi A4 range, and it's on a new platform, entirely new technology, a major upgrade and overhaul, and they've rejigged their entire production line for the new A4. So call that every 8 years. Roughly about halfway through that stage, the manufacturers bring out what they call a facelift. And that's just to get a little bit of more energy in the market about halfway through the car's life. And a facelift typically has some more minor upgrades. The manufacturing line in the background remains the same. The core technology remains much the same, but they might add navigation into the tech, or cruise control. They might put a different bumper on the front and some new headlights to make it, to make it look a bit more exciting or something like that. But it's essentially the same vehicle. And so basically what you have there is you have a 4-year period where all the cars in the market are exactly the same. All those Audi A4s are the same A4. Some are just older than others in years. And then you have an 8-year period where they're much the same, just with some cosmetic and maybe technology tweaks. So let's imagine we're talking about that 4 years where we're talking exactly the same Audi A4. And you have a choice here of a lower mileage, 1 year older car, and a higher mileage, younger car. This is where I sort of come down quite strongly in favor of mileage. I'm a fan of low mileage, because in my view, a lot of what determines a car's wear and risk is how many kilometers it's put on the line or on the road, more than its age. So mileage on the road adds stone chips on the front. It adds wear on the seats, wear on the pedals, wear on the the gear shift if you've got a manual, all that kind of thing. Everything sort of wears, and also the engine gets used that extra 20,000 kilometers. So mileage is time on the road, and is both cosmetic wear as well as mechanical wear, which imposes risk on the car. Whereas if the same car is just sitting in the garage and is slightly older, it's not really, what's it doing? What damage is it suffering? So within that sort of range, I'd choose a car that is the lower mileage, older one, because you're getting the same vehicle, but with less wear on it. Time is not a big issue for me. Whereas if you actually look at the market data, it's quite funny. And 1 year older car will typically have a 4 to 8% price difference to its younger contemporary. So let me use, you've got a Volkswagen Polo 2016, and it's got 100,000 kilometers on the clock. If there's a Volkswagen Polo 2017, exactly the same vehicle with exactly the same mileage, 100,000 kilometers, it'll be more expensive by 4 to 8% on average.
And there's no reason.
Those are much the same vehicle. Yeah, that's just how the market works and how people price it and how they perceive it. So in that sort of case, I veer strongly towards sort of the mileage to get a better deal on a vehicle. But sorry, Warren, I jumped off on a bit of a tangent there. I think we were talking about the sweet spot on when you buy it. And yeah, I think that 5 to 10 year range is a good one. And then I was trying to give some advice on, where to steer when you're looking within that range.
And I think it's a powerful point, because we'll all of us that are looking at cars will go into Auto Trader and we'll that it'll allow you to limit the amount of time or whatever it is, and you say, well, okay, I'm going to buy I'm only going to buy a 4-year-old car, and what you're telling us, the data is telling us actually, is that don't worry about that. You should actually say, I'm not buying anything that's newer than, let's say, 4 years, older than, let's say, 7. And then you give preference to the 7-year-old car, provided the mileage is good. And actually, I think it's a powerful thing to kind of also manage your own emotions. If you know that you're one of those people that gets excited about buying cars, is don't just make sure that you don't see the newer cars, just block them out, and potentially the same thing around mileage. Just make sure that you are you kind of block out the high mileage cars as well, and then you get to your little universe of cars that you should be looking at, and then you make the rational decision. I think you made a point, that before we started the recording, that I'd love for you to explain, which is, and it sounds so obvious, but we don't do it, which is when you buy stuff and you then sell it, you want to be the guy that buys at a wholesale price and you want to sell it at the retail price. So you want to buy it at the discounted price and you want to sell it at the maximum price. And when you said that, I thought, yeah, that's obvious. But then I thought, in all my life, I've never bought a car at the wholesale price and sold it at the retail price. That never happens. So I'd love for you to explain that a bit, because I think it's such it's such a powerful point that we're just missing, I think, most of us as car buyers.
Well, I think I maybe led you down the wrong path there. The truth is that most consumers are going to be doing the opposite. You're buying at retail and you're selling at wholesale.
Yeah.
So every time you trade your car in, you're losing that margin. In share terms, your bid offer spread or your transaction cost or something like that. So if you churn your car often, you're losing that wholesale retail spread. A dealer, and there's good reason for that. If you're selling and buying from a car dealer, they've got to make money. And they make their money by buying at a wholesale or a trade price and selling at a retail price, and that sustains their business. And if you want to use a range of how much or what you'd expect that to be, the difference between the retail and the wholesale value, you can use a range of 8 to 15%. That's kind of what you can expect to lose each time you trade your car in, and that's quite a lot. It's not that much. There's good reason. A dealership margin, which I learned to my kind of horror when I got into this business, car dealerships are difficult businesses, and they're not high margin businesses that everyone kind of perceives, and they do need to make their margin to sustain the businesses, etc. As long as they run a good business, that's what the consumer expects of them. But as a consumer, you don't want to lose that margin too many times. So you can try and look at the private sale game as an example, where you would, for example, look to try and market your car to another private buyer at a price possibly slightly lower than the average retail price, and he would then be buying the car at slightly above or below where he would expect to pay, if he was buying at retail. And that does work for some people. A lot of people are scared of selling online or selling vehicles, themselves, because of the security aspects, because of the fear of not getting paid, because it's quite difficult when someone's looking to buy a car for you and they say, can you take my trade in or can you finance the deal? You don't necessarily have answers for those questions. So there is a role that car dealerships play in the ecosystem by assisting, by taking care of trade in, sorting out the security issues, raising finance on a new sale vehicle, etc. Nevertheless, the trick here is, I think, what you spoke about. You said if you speak, every time you get the itch to sell your car, you speak to your wife and then you end up holding on to it for another 5 years. And I don't think everyone has your wife's patience.
No.
There's a lot going on in cars. There are exciting things. It is a lot of fun to shop for a car. It's a lot of fun to own a car. It's great to have a new car. But I think the trick here is to not trade and churn too often, because every time you churn, you lose that, let's call it 10%. So in addition to the depreciation on the vehicle, you also lose 10% each time you change your vehicle. And here again is another reason to go for used rather than new. So let's imagine you've got the same vehicle, which would cost 500,000 Rand new, or a 5-year-old vehicle would cost 300,000 Rand. Now, you own it for a short period of time and you trade it in. You lose the depreciation, which we've spoken about, but you also lose the transaction cost depending on the value level of the vehicle you bought. So if you were sitting in the 500,000 Rand range, 10% of 500,000 is 50,000 Rand. If you're in the 300,000 vehicle range, 10% of that is only 30,000 Rand. So one of the benefits of working in the used car space, with roughly the same sort of equivalent vehicle, is that your transaction costs are lower in addition to your depreciation costs. So your entire cost of ownership drops accordingly, as a mix of that transaction and depreciation. And then if you're financing your vehicle, third leg, you're paying less interest because your capital cost is lower. The amount that you're financing is lower. So I think those three things together kind of, paint a picture that we should all be owning 10-year-old cars, but that's not how it really works. You buy a car for a lot of different reasons: for comfort, for convenience, for esteem, for excitement, etc., etc. And you have to try and find the right balance in that whole spectrum, that works for you.
So I mean, I think we're coming to the end of our time, and I have so many questions. So we're going to have to get you on another show, Colin. I'm going to prep you for my favorite question to new guests, but I'll give you some time to think about that. So that question is, if you were to meet the 18, 21-year-old Colin now, what would be the one piece of advice that you would like to give him? And it can be about money; it doesn't have to be. But one piece of kind of life advice that you think would make a big difference to young Colin as he enters adulthood. But while you think about that, I think the one question then is, I can think of a very good reason why someone should sell a car, and that will be safety. There is a point when a car gets too old, the parts become unavailable to service it and maintain it, etc., etc. But I can't think of another good reason to sell a car, actually. So if you've got an old car that's relatively low mileage, safe, then I'm guessing, I'm teeing you up, Colin, but I'm guessing the answer is there is no actually a good reason to sell that car. You should just keep driving it and until the point when it becomes an unsafe thing to drive.
Yeah. Financially.
Yes. Financially. Yeah. This is honest money, yes. Colin. You're on the couch.
Absolutely. So from a financial perspective, I agree with you. You just keep driving it as until you kind of lose confidence in its mechanical reliability or ability to service, or you start thinking maybe it's hitting that curve where it's more expensive to maintain than it's worth. Let me give you an example. At getWorth, we buy and sell cars up to sort of 12 years old or so. We're not so careful about the years, but up to about 140,000 kilometers. And outside of that range, we do have a couple of more reliable makes, but we tend to find that higher mileage starts imposing mechanical reliability and actually stands in the way of that, of what we're trying to sell, which is quality vehicles. So it's more difficult. Not to say there aren't quality vehicles at higher mileage levels. There certainly are, but there's a higher proportion of problems as the mileage increases. So I think as your mileage grows, your mechanical reliability does start tailing off a bit, and that is a good reason to switch to a lower mileage or newer vehicle. I think, and then outside of that, from a financial perspective, it's more about kind of what you want out of the car and the excitement of the new car. You're getting a bit tired of your one, or it's looking a little bit tired in the driveway compared to your neighbor's car. It all depends, but that's a non-financial decision.
So it's nice to get that number, somewhere around that 140,000 K starts to become you need to pay attention to those things. And I think you're right. I don't think about it as clearly that actually the ongoing maintenance costs on a car, might become the real issue in an older car. I'm looking for ammo here, Colin, that I can win an argument with my wife one day for the first time around cars. So thank you. I've got one now. I knew safety, but actually the 140,000 reliability thing becomes an issue as well. And I know it's not I know you're not saying that it's a fixed thing, that all cars fall apart at 140,000. It's just that probabilities that things start to go wrong increases over 140,000. So let's not upset the people that are driving the car with 140.
Further over 200. So.
Okay, 200. All right.
So,
all
you
right.
can
there we
use
go.
it with your wife, Warren. So as you hit 140, that's the day. GetWorth says so.
So Colin, to wrap up, what would be the one piece of advice that you would love to give to your younger self?
I think it would be to swim downstream. So I think that needs a bit of explanation. I found myself in my life at times working really hard and making progress, but swimming upstream. Like you're in a stream, or you find yourself in some sort of situation where you really have to work excessively hard to make progress. And even if you're making progress and you're happy with the progress, you kind of look to your right and there's a stream going the other direction. And there's a guy who's hardly flapping his tail. But he's like 200 meters ahead of you because he's placed himself in the right stream. And if I could go back and sort of speak to my 20-year-old self and tell myself, pick your stream. And if you find yourself swimming upstream, turn around and go the other way, or kind of try and get into an eddy or something like that. There's several sort of sections of 5 or 7 years of my life where I really, looking back with great hindsight and everything, should have changed streams. And it would have made life a hell of a lot easier, or I would have made a hell of a lot more progress in that time that I spent. And I think, that would be a nice one to be able to tell myself. Whether I'd listen or not would be a totally different story.
That's powerful. I must say, this, I think we kind of feel, we get a return on ego about swimming against the stream, and, we're making a difference in everything. And then 5 years later, you realize you're exhausted, and actually what have you really accomplished by kind of going against the tide? Sometimes you have to. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, and I think I'll always be the world's worst employee because I don't want to be told what to do. But surely choosing the direction and the flow of things, you can make your life easier. I think it's powerful. Colin Morgan, thanks so much. Head of pricing at getWorth. I really enjoyed that. I think I learned a lot. We don't have to be emotional about cars. I think we should be very logical and rational, and it doesn't mean you can't ever buy a car again. It just means you need to be careful about doing it, and do it with a calculator, not with a fancy brochure. It was great to have you on the show, Colin. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Warren. It was great to be here.
The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.